Welcome to this edition of Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, President of the London Center for Policy Research. If you enjoy our content, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment. Please be sure to join our Patreon at patreon.com, Thought to Action. Subscribers will get special behind-the-scenes content, early access, and of course, the ability to ask us questions for our always vivacious Thought to Action Ask Us Anything sessions. Again, we're here to try to do what we can to educate the public on a series of issues relating to national security, energy, the constitutional protections that I think we all value, and of course, accountability is a big part of what we're trying to do. And so I am joined today by a former intelligence officer, Army intelligence officer. We share some of the same DNA, which is either good or bad, depending on one's perspective. Chris Farrell, the Director of Investigations for Judicial Watch. Hey, Chris, welcome to Thought to Action.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So, I don't know how to do this because this is a bit awkward by the fact that the very issue I'm going to be talking to you about is something that I'm personally a party of. So just a few days ago, 11 January, I'll just read the title from your news announcement. Government takes 16 years to reply to public records request and thanks you, Judicial Watch, for your patience. In what world, let's just start with that. In what world is that okay? I simply don't understand how the government can do that. I mean, yeah. Is this, go ahead, please. I don't mean to interrupt.
That's brought to you by the same people that think that you can use the term ethics waiver and not be
like jumbo shrimp. Yeah.
So, as you well know, we had filed a Freedom of Information Act request or government open records request concerning a data mining project that the Defense Department was involved in called Able Danger.
I've heard of it.
At this point, Tony breaks into a cold sweat. This is decades of work. Anyway, so we were interested in data mining projects, Able Danger in particular, and you can explain why that's so important,
sure.
Tony. We had actually sued and obtained records from other government agencies concerning this data mining project, its relevance to terrorism, to targeting by special operations forces, to 9/11 itself and the hijackers involved. And we got a ton of information out. We shared that with you in your own quest to get a little justice in this issue.
Right.
But in one instance, Special Operations Command had not fully responded or come back to us. And they had acknowledged receipt of our request. They'd given us some basic sort of acknowledgement type correspondence. But then there had been this years-long silence. We had already pursued other angles, sued other agencies, gotten other document productions, but SOCOM was sitting there in the corner being very quiet. And so 16 years later, they come back to us and say, oh, you're one of our longest, most outstanding open requests. Are you still interested? And I said to them, yes, we are still very much interested. Continue to process and tell us when you're going to actually do your job. I couldn't resist that 16-year-old letter. And so we did a press release just to sort of embarrass them. And I knew that you would get a kick out of it.
Well, I do. And just for the audience to remember, Able Danger was the first time Special Operations Command was tasked as the lead SYNC. That is to say that they're supported SYNC to engage in global counterterrorism operations. General Hugh Shelton, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, actually signed out a document directing Special Operations Command to go after Al-Qaeda a full year before, 2 years, not 1999, before the 9/11 attacks. Able Danger, the focus we have is not so much on the operational issues, Chris, but it's on the data mining, on the technology that was at the time nascent. People did not understand. And I think maybe that's part of what they don't want to talk about is how you could use big data to essentially establish groups of targets for purposes of something. And so the basic premise of the Able Danger data mining was to take and digitize, before this was all well known, digitize the 93 World Trade Center bombers, the profiles, take each individual, do a digital model of that individual, put that into an algorithm and say, go out and find me guys who look like this. Find people within this larger database. And that database consisted of information from open source, from one of the more controversial points, mosque records, which is something they don't want to talk about to this day, issues, access to INS databases, travel databases. So you take all of this, put it into one big 3 terabyte package, and you go searching. And that's what we're after. That's what we ask you to look at. It's like, yeah, this is where we found these guys. We found these guys within this. And it was unclassified. Now, there's a point where it was combined with mystery ball between the data mining and then Steve Cambone testifying in 2006 as part of Able Danger, saying they had taken the results of the Able Danger targeting and put it into the war plan to go after Al Qaeda after 9/11. Okay, so there's that like mysterious piece there.
Yeah.
That no one seems to be wanting to talk about, and that's what I find frustrating. So, was that a fairly accurate kind of rendition from your perspective?
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's a surprisingly simple thing that gets very complicated very quickly.
Yeah.
And then there's the people that jump in and kind of wave a magic wand and say, "Oh no, this is all classified." Like you said, it really isn't. It's just the ability of taking, and again, even this is really ancient history, right? We're talking about stuff from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That you could now do on your iPhone 13. that back then this was technological miracles, and now it's not that big a deal.
So, yeah, and one other point I want to bring up in reference to this is John Crane. You and I both know John. John was one of the lead investigators. And so what relates to this directly is his Able Danger IG report. Back in 2019, a few years ago, a lot more recent than the FOIA, he basically submitted a urgent request to the current intelligence community, the IG, saying, hey, I was pressured into throwing the IG report I did in 2006. How is that not an important thing for the intelligence community to be looking at? How do they get away with kicking the can down the road? I mean, again, it's one thing for 16 years. Another thing where the lead investigator who was looking at the very thing we just talked about, is basically ignored.
Yeah, this is one of the things that makes me very frustrated, not necessarily with Mr. Crane and the DOD IG, but I can tell you, and you know this story from your own experiences, probably 100 different ways, is that there's people in all the alphabet soup agencies, I don't care where it is, FBI, CIA, DIA, whatever, who know that there's all kinds of bad stuff going on, but all they're interested in doing is hitting the 20-year mark.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're careerists, they're opportunists, and they know that there's real bad stuff going on, but they're afraid. They will not step up and blow the whistle. They will not confront or do sort of the fall on the sword thing. The one notable exception is that Marine-like colonel who criticized the Afghan
Kurt Schiller. Yeah.
And
Schiller,
I think it's Stu Scheller or whatever.
Stu Schiller. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
And so here's a guy who actually had enough guts. I think he was at the 17-year mark as a light colonel commanding a battalion. And he said, this is a travesty. This is absolute humiliation. It's nothing that I raised my right hand and swore to. I mean, it was remarkably refreshing that a guy like that actually stood up and did what he did, knowing that it would be career suicide.
So I don't know if you knew, I actually testified at this trial. I actually testified during the trial to say what Stu did is a whistleblower. The judge, uniquely, I don't know if you've ever participated in a military trial, but the judge actually looked over and questioned me directly about my comments. And I basically, because he was saying, are you adding to the legal defense regarding what he's saying he should be? I said, no, I'm not adding to the defense. I'm simply stating that what you just said, Chris, that if everything was equal, what Stu did was essentially serve as a whistleblower because he spoke out against what he observed to be wrongdoing of his chain of command.
Right.
So So it's unique that he did that. Fortunately for him, it looks like he'll come out on this okay. But yes, he decided at 17 years he was going to do the right thing and just say what he did. So I guess to summarize before I go to my next topic, which is your book, I'll get to that in 1 second. What needs to be done? What can we continue to do? Because for better or for worse, I didn't know I was going to be a whistleblower. I know this is ironic. People's like, well, how did you not know this? Like, I was told to go to Congress and I was told to tell the truth. I had no idea that the effects would be what they are. So right. What are people supposed to do? What can they do to help you guys and help us to kind of continue to pursue this sort of thing?
Right. So what a lot of folks do is they have sort of a, I don't mean this in the pejorative, but they have sort of an immature view or approach on how to properly blow the whistle or how to address any kind of fraud, waste, and abuse kind of stuff. And they sort of naively walk into, a buzzsaw. And so if they really have an awareness of some sort of illegal or unethical activity, they should always consult with some kind of an attorney to know what the legal foundation, what their position or status is. Right. Because it's obviously different for a serving military member than it is a civilian. They need to understand what their status and rights are. Because even with civilians, there's different flavors of civilians who have different responsibilities and requirements. And so making a protected disclosure or making a whistleblower claim and who you make it to it's critically important to know and to have all the I's dotted and T's crossed, because if not, they're going to destroy you. I guarantee. Right. Here's the other thing they're going to do. They're going to take apart every single aspect of your professional life. So every travel claim you ever filed, if you spent $5 more than you were allowed for your meal, or if you're not allowed to have a beer at dinner, but you did, they're going to pursue you on that. Right. Time and attendance. If you took an afternoon off to go take your kid to the doctor and didn't put in your leave slip, they're going to go after you on that. So they're going to pick you apart. And then I guess the third part is realize that once you go down that path, there's no coming back. It's the cucumber and the pickle thing. Once you're a pickle, that's it. You can't go back to being a cucumber. So there's this, just understand and know what you're doing and legally know what it is, but then also understand the impact on you, on your profession, on your family. It's a daunting exercise. And it's not for everybody. And a lot of times people come to us, and I know people have come to you, and they're really kind of damaged goods. The system,
nobody's perfect. Literally, nobody's perfect. Yeah.
Yes, and the system has made them crazy. It's chewed them up. And so we're put in a position where you have to kind of help restore their life or get them back to normal. And it's ugly. So this is an ugly, messy business. All of the powers of the state are going to be used against you. And people need to understand just how tough that can be. So that's kind of a downer in the world of truth, justice, and the American way. But you just have to understand that those are the odds you're up against, because the big bad government doesn't like to be told it's wrong. They just don't like it.
And I appreciate your clarity on this. And obviously, I think people need to go down this path for the right reasons. At the same time, there can be a light at the other end of the tunnel. I mean, I know a number of folks. Stu Schiller is going to be, I think, taken care of okay. Others have come through. It's a traumatic process, much like birth. But obviously, when you get through,
you're living proof. You went through hell. I mean, our
not done yet.
Viewers and listeners should appreciate all the garbage, all the crap you went through, and the stress and the turmoil. And thank God that you popped out on the other side okay. But there's a lot of people that don't, not even like a fraction of how you've come out.
No, and I appreciate that, Chris. And if it wasn't for partnerships, I mean, full disclosure, you guys have been very much a part of trying to go after the government's information on this, which I appreciate. But and I think that's the challenge, is like people need to do this. They need to know what to expect and work their way through it. But so again, I appreciate for the fact that you guys, after 16 years, are still on top of this, and I still believe there's more to come. So on to happier issues. You wrote a book called Exiled Emissary, which is about George H. Earl III, soldier, sailor, diplomat, governor, spy. Now, I've listened to your talk on this, and I'm going to read the book because I got it now. But just from listening to your discussion, this guy talk about having a whirlwind of contacts of context of World War II, and literally, I don't think I'm speaking out of school here. This guy's actions could have easily changed the outcome of World War II. So tell us a little bit about Exiled Emissary and why you did it, and what people are going to find if they read it.
Sure. So George Earl was a kind of playboy millionaire who did some pretty amazing stuff. I mean, calling him a playboy millionaire from Philadelphia kind of makes it seem superficial. But here's a guy who went out and got a road with General Pershing into Mexico and got a battlefield commission to a second lieutenant. Got out of the Army. World War I starts. He takes his uncle's 70-foot yacht, gets it commissioned as a naval reserve vessel, takes a commission as an ensign, and goes out submarine chasing off the Atlantic coast. While he's out there, he earns the Navy Cross.
Wow.
Then he goes back into private business and makes a ton of money. His family was already very wealthy. He makes a tremendous amount of money himself. Decides that he's going to flip against his family's Republican leanings and decides to support FDR, who he knew from college. Gives FDR a ton of money for his campaign. So surprise, surprise, FDR makes him an ambassador. He's in Vienna from 33 to 35, which was a pretty rough time to be in Vienna with the Nazis, squeezing Austria. Some amazing adventures there. Comes back, becomes governor of Pennsylvania, which at the time was a critical, hugely powerful state in the 1930s. Now it's kind of a Rust Belt state, but still significant. He hosts the 36th Democratic National Convention for FDR, and everybody's talking about him as being the next president behind FDR. He actually backs away from the 1940 nomination, lets FDR run for an unprecedented third term. So then he goes off and becomes ambassador again to Sofia, Bulgaria. World War I or World War II breaks out. He decides to re-enter the Navy, and I think he's a 53-year-old Navy lieutenant commander and a gunnery officer on a troop ship. Invades North Africa, or is part of the invasion force. Meets his old buddy from polo playing days, a guy named George Patton. You may have heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
Hangs out with Patton in North Africa for a while, then goes back and briefs FDR on what Patton has to say about that. Eventually gets appointed to be the assistant naval attaché in Istanbul, Turkey, which is obviously very thin diplomatic cover for him conducting espionage activities in Istanbul.
All right.
Earl's an interesting guy. He's a multimillionaire, self-made kind of guy, family money, but really very aggressive in his own right. He doesn't need a title or a position to do what he is. He's sort of like Trump before Trump. He has money and is independent and does whatever he damn well pleases. But then, it's very well known when he gets to Istanbul because of his previous positions as ambassador, because he'd been governor of Pennsylvania, because he'd been a big funder of FDR. The Germans know who he is, and they know that he's sort of the president's eyes in the Balkans and in Turkey. And so he's in Istanbul about 2 weeks, and there's a knock on his door one night. He had an entire floor of a hotel that he rented out for himself. And the knock on the door is Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, the head of the German Abwehr. And Canaris in person appears with him or visits him and says, look, we'll give you Hitler dead or alive, but we want an armistice immediately. And then we want to turn around and attack the Soviets together. And the problem with this, or it's really sort of the inspiration for this, had been the Casablanca conference had happened just a couple of weeks earlier in January 43. And that's where FDR had announced unconditional surrender as the only terms by which the Allies would deal with the Germans. That terrified a lot of the German leadership, even the anti-Hitler resistance German leadership,
Right.
because they thought that it put them in an impossible position, that they would violate their oath really to protect the country, and as serving military officers, unconditional surrender would betray themselves and their oath. And so they were looking for a way out, and their way out was to arrange this armistice. And the appeal was, look, the Soviets are the real threat. We may have our disagreements within Europe. We hate Hitler too. We'll give him to you. But really, we need to focus on the Soviets. There's a lot of detail in the book that we can't talk about here. This was not some pie in the sky concept.
No.
They had dates, times, locations, the units that would seize Hitler, how they would do it, excruciating detail. So anyway, what happens in the end is that Earl goes back to FDR and says to him, hey, look, here's this proposal. And FDR does not reply. He gives him nothing but silence. And so the war drags on for another 18 months. The second big point was the Katyn Forest massacre, where the Soviets slaughtered 20,000 Poles. FDR had commissioned Earl to look into that. Earl did. He came back to FDR and told him the Soviets did it. And FDR flew off the handle and said, no, it's the Nazis. They did it. He did not want to hear anything about the Soviets or Stalin.
Wow.
So when Earl confronts FDR, they had quite a blowout fight in the Oval Office. Earl confronts him on this. FDR forbids him to ever speak of the matter again, and then transfers him to, get ready for it, Samoa. Sends Earl to be the deputy military governor of Samoa, knowing that he won't be able to leak or talk or get a hold of anybody. And so that whole storyline gets shut down. Earl doesn't speak of it publicly again until the 1950s, and he finally tells the truth. But all of this has been suppressed, and everything that I've said to you, I have a document for. I've spent years in the National Archives, dragging all this stuff out.
Right. Well, I have no doubt, and I think that's what's most compelling about this, is that it seems to me that one of my old associates used to always talk about the truth being negotiable if it becomes a political issue. And obviously, the truth here was a fungible product that was something that FDR used to his advantage by the fact that, they knew, but they did not want to act. And I think, simply put, George Earl could have, had he convinced FDR to do something, completely change the trajectory of world history. I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Correct. Yep.
So anyway, I do encourage people to go out and pick this up. I got this off Amazon, as well as how many other copies did I get? I think I got 5 other copies. I'm looking forward to you signing eventually here. No, I always give out these things to my friends for gifts and stuff, especially, great stuff like this. So again, I encourage everybody to go pick this up. I think this book fits in with the theme of what we're talking about, is the idea of trying to establish an understanding of real history, of real facts, not that which is, I'd say, kind of processed like a can of potted meat. It seems to me that that the history that people want us to consume is very much processed and often fact-free or light on facts. So again, please run out and pick up Exiled Emissary. I think you'll find it's worthy of any James Bond-esque accolades. So I'd encourage you to pick it up. So, well, Chris, thank you for joining Thought to Action today. I appreciate your steadfast and continued commitment to going after the truth and pursuing it. I admired you guys when I first met you. I still admire you all these years later. And I appreciate the hard work you guys do over there regarding just doggedly pursuing the truth.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's great to be on with you.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us for this edition of Thought to Action, where we present alternate and more compelling aspects of what is going on in today's world regarding policy, national security, and the range of things that we work. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, be sure and comment on our content, as well as join our Patreon activity so you can be involved in early access and ask us questions for our Ask Us Anything sessions. So thank you again today for joining us for Thought to Action, and we look forward to seeing you all again very soon.